Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are returning, thank you guys for coming back. And for those of you who are new, welcome. My name is Rachel and I make new videos every week on a bunch of different things. So for today's video, I kind of wanted to go off of my last video where I did a day in the life of what a school psychologist looks like. And my role as a school psych probably looks really different from a lot of other people's, but I just thought it would be interesting to share what my role looks like because I primarily do assessments right now, and I'm based in Massachusetts, and I feel like that's common in Massachusetts for school psychs mainly to do assessments, but it varies like depending on what state you're in, because I did my internship and my training to become a school psych in Rhode Island. It's definitely more of a comprehensive role filled with a bunch of different things in Rhode Island. So it's definitely different no matter where you are, but my favorite thing to do is assessments, which leads me to this video. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking all about assessments. And just for some background info, I feel like even though I'm still like new to the field, I feel like I've tested so many kids because I'm now in my second year of being a school psychologist. So I have done assessments ever since like grad school when I was in practicum and internship. And I've also worked at a neuropsychology office for 2 years while I was in grad school. So I did that part-time. And honestly, that was like one of my favorite jobs besides my current job. Because I was able to test for all different neuropsychologists, and I would do the testing, the scoring, and write my behavior observations of the students. So I learned even more assessments working at a neuropsychology office than I did in grad school. So yeah, I feel like I have a pretty good foundation knowledge base about this. So I thought it would be interesting to share with you guys all the different types of assessments that school psychologists use and neuropsychologists. And just for reference, a lot of them overlap too. So I'm gonna be starting with all the ones that like overlap, and then I'll focus a little bit more on extra things that you can get from like a neuropsychologist evaluation. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to cover 4 main areas of assessment. So the biggest 4 things that are usually evaluated that you're looking to get more information on are cognitive skills, so your like IQ, academic skills, social emotional functioning, and adaptive functioning. And with the cognitive, that like really breaks up. Like you're looking at all different things like memory, processing speed, etc. So all the tests I'm going to be going over are standardized formal assessments, which pretty much means that, you know, everybody that's trained to administer these has to administer them the exact same way. Like you shouldn't be doing special accommodations for a student unless they need them. For example, if they don't speak English as well, they might need an interpreter. This way they can better understand the directions and what they're supposed to be doing. So making those kind of accommodations are fine, but for the most part, everyone's supposed to be saying the directions exactly the same, not offering help, not offering praise, etc. So that's what standardized pretty much is. And all of the tests are norm referenced, meaning that for all these tests, before they came out, they were given to like over 1,000 students at least. They all have different sample sizes, and most students scored within a certain range, which was considered the average range, and then some veer off, lower than average, higher than average. So there are norms for every single age and grade. So once you're done testing, we'll convert the raw scores into standard scores. And this way we get a really good sense of like, how is this kid performing compared to where other 10-year-olds are, or where other like 5th graders are performing. And it really gives you a good sense of where they're at and versus where they should be. I just wanted to review that first because that pretty much applies to everything that I'm going to be talking about today. So the biggest thing that school psychs are known for is doing cognitive assessment. All the cognitive abilities that we test relate to kids learning in school and just like everybody every day. For example, we'll administer tasks to assess like your working memory. So it's similar to short-term memory, but you're actively using that information and you like have to recall it or manipulate that information in some way. And we also look at things like your verbal skills, so your ability to verbalize concepts, your ability to process information is another area that we look at. So how quickly can you take information in, think about it, and then generate a response? Some kids take longer to answer. For example, like if a teacher asks a question, some kids might shoot their hand up right away, and some kids actually have to process what the teacher is saying for another like few seconds before they can raise their hand and answer. It's just like so interesting to kind of see all these different cognitive profiles and how we can better support students. So the most common test, I would say, for cognitive testing is the Wechsler scales. So that includes the WISC, which is for ages 6 to 16, the WACE for ages 16 to 90. So I get some like 17-year-olds because I'm mostly at the high school level. So it's pretty similar, the WISC and the WACE, just a little bit more of an adult version. They have the WASI, which is an abbreviated cognitive, and the WIPSI. So there's a lot of Wechsler scales. Those are definitely the most commonly used, I would say, for neuropsych offices and school offices. Other ones, though, include like the RIAS, the Stanford-Binet, and the Woodcock-Johnson cognitive. Those are also really good. It's just for some reason the Wechsler scales are the most popularized, but it doesn't mean exactly that they're the best. Like, you know, I've done my research with other ones too. They all have their pros and cons, but more often than not, the Wechsler scales will be used. Okay, so next up is academic skills. So typically I don't administer academic achievement tests, but with this current school year, it has transitioned over to the school psychologist doing most of the testing. So I'm fine with that. I don't really mind because it's actually more helpful for me to compare their cognitive and academic together. A lot of the academic assessments will use grade-based norms. So looking at where children are in 5th grade compared to where this 5th grader is. And again, the Wechsler scale for the academic achievement test is like one of the most popular. It's called the Wyatt-3. And other ones besides that, again, include the Woodcock-Johnson achievement, the KTAE, I can never say that fast, 3, right, KTEA 3, and the GORT, which is just for reading, fluency, and comprehension. So they have ones that are like more broad and they focus on reading, writing, and math, and that's like the Wyatt. And then they also have ones like the GORT that are just focused on one thing, which is reading. So I will say the academic testing typically takes longer. It would take like an hour to do a cognitive for me, and with the Wyatt, depending on the grade too, it takes like an hour and a half to 2 hours for older students. But yeah, those are like the most common. Another really big area besides the cognitive that a lot of school psychs and neuropsychologists will do is social emotional assessment. So you can't really give like a formalized test to measure social emotional. So the biggest thing that we do is give out rating scales. I really like giving out rating scales. The only thing is it is very subjective because you're relying on somebody's answers to pretty much give you evidence or give you data to support or not support whether certain issues are going on with a student. Because I typically work with older students, I always have the student also complete a questionnaire about themselves. Usually if they're like at least 12, I'll give them a self-report. And then I also give parents and teachers rating scales. This way we're getting all different perspectives. Like, how are they in the home setting versus the school setting? Are the teacher and parents seeing the same issues, or are they seeing very different profiles of the student? So yeah, depending on what the concern is, then you choose what rating scales you're going to give out. And some are more comprehensive. So one that's always like a go-to of mine is the BASC-3. It's the Behavior Assessment System for Children. It focuses on so many areas. It is lengthy, but that's the good thing, because if there are some concerns, but there could potentially be more, that one will cover everything. It covers adaptive skills, attention, behavior, like external behaviors like aggression, internal behaviors like depression. So that one is so comprehensive, definitely a good go-to. For more specific ones, like for autism, we'll give the GARS or the CARS. For attention, we'll give like the Connors 3. That's one of the most common ones that we give. and that one specifically looks at symptoms associated with ADHD. For executive functioning, we'll give the brief 2. It's the behavior rating inventory of executive functioning. I'm so used to calling them by just a short name, so I can never remember sometimes what the long name is. And that looks at different aspects of executive functioning, like initiating tasks, ability to sustain their attention on tasks, etc. And then for like depression and anxiety, so for high schoolers that already have a diagnosis of depression and anxiety, I'll give the student a self-report. Often I'll give them the Beck Youth Inventories, and it has a whole scale for depression, a whole scale for anxiety. Another thing that we used at the neuropsych office was the CDI, which is the Child's Depression Inventory. So yeah, there's a whole slew of rating scales out there. They all cost money, so when we buy them for the school, we really think about, okay, what covers the bases for all of these concerns? One's for each specific area of concern, as well as the comprehensive one, which is the VAS. And then the last thing that we assess is adaptive functioning. You mainly look at adaptive functioning when a student either has autism or intellectual disability. Usually students with intellectual disability, they have to meet certain criteria. Most students with ID have a cognitive that is 3 standard deviations below the mean. So if solid average is 100, you would expect them to have an IQ of around 70. And it might be a little higher, a little lower. I mean, we don't base it just off that one score because all students are different. Usually they have a lower IQ, and then you'd pair it with an adaptive rating scale. Again, there's no formalized test that I have done to assess adaptive functioning. So typically you would give either a rating scale or a teacher interview or parent interview. So ones that I've learned before, the Vineland, which is an interview format for parents and teachers, and the ABAS. That's really common. That's the main thing I use in the school is the ABAS, parent and teacher rating scales. It really gives you a good sense of what the student is able to do independently. It really looks at different life skills. My cat came to join us. So yeah, like for example, assessing their communication abilities, their ability to know and understand safety rules. Like if there's a fire, what do they do? Who do they call? And their ability to engage in different self-care activities like grooming themselves and just keeping up with personal hygiene, that type of thing. And then the last area, so this is more geared toward just the neuropsychologist office. So these are the tests that I learned primarily there. I've seen other school psychologists use them. It just depends on if you're trained in them. And I really did enjoy learning other tests besides what I learned in grad school. What I will say is when I worked at a neuropsych office, I worked for like 4 different clinicians. And I did all different ages. I tested kids from 5 to people who were like 90. So I worked with every population there, which was really good experience. I did enjoy that. What I learned from working with all 4 is that each one had their own standard battery. So that pretty much means that no matter what the concern is, like why that person's coming in for testing, they always do the same few tests, like that's their standard battery, and then they'll add on additional tests depending on what the concern is. Most of them would always do an IQ test, an academic screener, so not all academics, but just getting a sense of how they do academically. They would always give a memory test, always one attention, so they're kind of like covering their bases, and then they would give extra if like it was significant attention concern. They would do more in that area. For example, extra memory tests that we learned were the RAML. That was really good because it provides a memory task giving them more context. So you tell the child a story and they have to like retell it to you as best as they can. You read a list of words and they have to say as many words back to you, and they have different trial periods. So the RAML is definitely good for memory. Some more executive functioning tests that I learned at the neuropsych office is the DKEFs and the RAO. So the DKEFs is, I only did a couple subtests from it, but it really looks at different aspects of executive functioning, like your ability to sustain your attention for a while, flexibility. So we would do like trail making where they had to be flexible and go from like number to letter in order. So that definitely takes some like flexibility and just like thinking of that and trying to go as quickly as you can. And then we'd also give something called the Rayo, where you're shown a crazy design and you have to copy it exactly as it is. And depending on how the student plans and organizes the task really tells you a lot about their executive functioning. So that's always really cool to see. We also did a few fine motor tasks. Usually in the school setting, that's the OT, like the occupational therapist does those. I don't. But it's just interesting to know them, especially if the OT does testing at the school. I know what some of that looks like then. So we would do the Beery, which looks at a lot of like the fine motor handwriting and drawing and copying images, and then the groove pegboard, where you're asking students to put little pegs back into these grooves with one hand at a time as fast as they can. Another for attention is, I always felt so bad giving this. It's called the CPT, and it's a 15-minute computerized task where people have to sit down and just like repetitively hit the space bar on a computer. And it really looks at, are you able to sustain your attention and focus at the same time on the letters? Because for certain letters, you're not supposed to press the space bar. So I always feel so bad giving that to little kids, but it really is a good measure of attention. And the last thing is the NEUROPSY. This one was like such a big test. We would only do parts of it. So I remember doing a memory test where students have to remember faces. They're given like 3 faces, and then later on they have to choose which one did they see the first time in the trial run. So that one's really interesting. And they also have ones in there that measure like language and social perception. So the ones for social perception are really good for like students that may be on the spectrum, you're not sure, so they would probably administer those. And then also one is called comprehension of instructions on the NEUROPSY. So just are they able to comprehend and pay attention to what I'm saying and also follow through with that task. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up down below. That really helps me out, lets me know that you guys want to see more of this. Be sure to subscribe to my channel down below. I make new videos every week. And until next time, I will see you guys very soon. Bye!